All right, we're back, and my heater's being a little less noisy, so yay. In this segment, we're going to start off by talking about Gordon Allport. So, Allport defined personality as the dynamic organization within the individual of those psychophysical systems that determine his characteristic behavior and thought. Now, remember, he was doing research in the 40s and 50s, so forgive him for using the old-timey his to mean the generic people. Sorry, there's my clock chirping. It's all sorts of noise at my house. So personality is the dynamic organization within the individual of those psychophysical systems that determine his characteristic behavior and thoughts. So psychophysical, so he's making a little bit of a nod to the brain, and psycho is a little bit of a nod to, how the brain, is thinking, right? How the brain is organized, that kind of, the mental part of it. Each person has unique qualities according to Allport. Wow, that's surprising, but that's true, right? All of us have unique qualities. And he took a very philosophical, humanistic, and scholarly approach to the study of traits and personality. So what does that mean? Philosophical, one of the biggest differences between, a science and philosophy is the way that data is collected, right? So in a philosophical approach, logic is a perfectly fine way to draw a conclusion. In a scientific approach, you need logic, of course, but you need to back it up with data. You need to show that this is how the world actually works in objective terms. So there's a little bit of less concrete data collection going on with Allport's model. When we say that he's humanistic, he's saying that there's something substantially different between a human and all other creatures. That's what humanism is about, that there's something unique about humans, and that each person is special and unique. So he's taking a very person-centered approach as far as like humans being special, and we need to understand that. He took a very scholarly approach. He attempted to tie together different thought processes. He went across lots of different disciplines in his efforts to explain personality, not just psychology. So he came to the conclusion that regularities in behavior, so this very consistency that we call personality, the regularities in behavior arise because the individual views situations and stimuli consistently. So that's kind of what the cognitive psychologist had said, right? That it's about how the person's perceiving the situation. And Allport seems to be agreeing with them in saying that most individuals bring with them this consistency, right? To view situations and stimuli in a similar way across situations and across time. And then he also said regularities in behavior arise because of what he called functional equivalence. Lots of the things that a person might do have similar meanings. They could be viewed from the outside as having the same basic meaning. Even if the individual meant something else from the inside, even if their motivation was different for the two different behaviors, they can look very similar from the outside. So we call that functional equivalence. They have the same basic outcome. Now, I mentioned that he was doing his research, again, in the 40s and 50s. And so there was a really strong influence of the behaviorists, even on people who are very humanistically oriented. And so there's going to be a lot of focus on watching the actual behavior and not trying to draw too much interpretation about what was going on inside the actor. So that's why, we see consistency because as observers, these behaviors look the same, even though the person who's acting might say, oh, I did it that one because of this, and I did that one because of that. And this is really, my personality is driving me to think about it differently, but my acts may look the same from the outside. Common traits, the fact that we see, shared traits among people. He says that that's because of our biological heritage, that we have the same basic genes setting up our brains, and also shared culture, right? So that if you're measuring people within a single culture, we may come to the conclusion, oh, they all share a trait, but these might just be, attitudes or dispositions that are fostered within the culture. Like, for example, behaving, in a dominant way, having, taking control of a group, or these kinds of things in American culture is something that's very much not only accepted, but maybe encouraged, right? Like you don't want to be passive, you want to be more dominant. Other cultures, they don't necessarily look at it like that. And so a person who holds back because they're from another culture, they may have very similar personality traits to the person who's behaving in a dominant way, but you have to separate out the presentation of their traits that is culturally, biased. The presentation may vary. And so that's the important thing to remember, that, we all kind of, no matter what culture we come from, we all share a lot of biology. We're more the same than different as far as DNA goes, right? And so our brains are largely developed in similar ways as a function of the genes, at least. But then, of course, everything gets shaped by culture. And so as long as we only study within a culture, we may get the misinterpretation that there are more shared traits than there really are. So let's talk about specifically what he introduced to explain personality. First off, he introduced this term called proprium, and he said that that is your core of your personality, is this proprium. I don't know where they come up with these words. It's, if I was more of an Allport fan, I probably, and in fact, I've read a lot of Allport, but I just really don't know exactly where he came up with the word proprium. A lot of times students ask me that. I'm like, I'm curious about it while I talk about him, and then I forget about it afterwards. So it's Allport's made up or, invoked word to describe the core of personality. Now, to measure the proprium, we can use idiographic methods. Idiographic means that they're unique to the person. Idio means self or individual, right? And then graphic would be ways that people can write stuff down. So that would be diaries. We could interview them and write down what they say. We can use a technique called a Q sort, where we give them a bunch of statements and they sort them into piles from these really just these words or terms really describe me well. I'll put them over here on the right. These don't describe me at all. I'll put them over here on the left. And then anything in between we can make. I think they're allowed to make 7 or 9 piles. I can't remember which one in the Q sort. So you can have like really, really describes me, doesn't describe me at all, kind of sort of describes me, neutral, anything in between. These idiographic methods are designed to take into account each person's uniqueness. It's a nod to Allport's basic perspective that we're all unique, that we all have like different constellation of traits. These methods also are really helpful for compensating for the limitations of the nomothetic methods, which are group-based methods. Instead of looking at each individual like the idiographic methods do, the nomothetic methods aggregate scores into, averages, which we talk about a lot in this class. Like on average, men act like this, and on average, women act like that, right? We do these kinds of nomothetic methods really commonly in psychology. So when we say the word nomothetic, it means that we've averaged the results across the group, and we're dealing with that average instead of treating each person as an individual within the data. Another aspect of the proprium, so that's how we would measure it, is using idiographic methods. And then another thing I wanted to mention is that he assumes that the proprium contains, personal dispositions. It contains our goals, our motives, our styles of, behaving. There are different kinds of dispositions. There are the cardinal dispositions, which are, he called it your ruling passion. This is the thing you're probably known for, would be your cardinal disposition. So like maybe you're known for being the life of the party, or you're known for being really conscientious, or you're known for being really empathetic or something like that. And like everybody who knows you, if we gave them one word to describe you, your cardinal disposition would be the thing that they probably all would generate. The central disposition are fundamental qualities. So these are typical descriptors that, after all of your friends and family all gave your cardinal disposition, some of them would give this central disposition for you, and some would give that central disposition for you. These are things that, really will come up commonly. Like more than one of your friends might say that you're honest. More than one of them might say that you're intelligent. But unlike the cardinal, where everybody says you're empathetic, some of them might say honest, some of them might say intelligent. It's common, more than one says each of those things, but not all of them say it. And so it's probably just really central to your personality, but not your cardinal disposition. And then finally, there are the secondary dispositions, which are dispositions that really reveal themselves only in certain circumstances. So maybe you're really a chatty person and you talk to people in the grocery store line, and you're really popular in class, and people like to talk to you and stuff, but when it's time for you to give a speech in class, you're terrified, and everybody who knows you is like, wow, this is actually really surprising. You're so chatty, and you don't seem frightened to talk to a stranger, and like, what's happening? It's a secondary disposition that only comes out in certain circumstances. So even your best friends could be unaware that you have this secondary disposition as part of your personality, unless they've been with you in the appropriate circumstance to have it be revealed. So so this is the basic design of Allport's explanation of personality, that you have this core personality that he called the Proprium, and then it's made up of all these personal dispositions that can be your goals, they can be your motives, they can be your styles. It's, those are all different kinds of personal dispositions. And then you've got the cardinal ones, central and secondary ones that now that you think about it, this description makes a lot of sense, because the presence or absence of secondary dispositions, being really sort of dependent on the circumstance, allows us to not always look perfectly consistent across situations, right? So, he's describing this cardinal disposition that should reveal itself in all situations. Like, it's hard for you not to display this general, like, ruling passion component of your personality. It's hard for you not to display that. That's probably going to be pretty apparent to most people who know you. The central dispositions, people who know you well enough and have seen you across lots of different situations, will probably be able to generate those. But the secondary dispositions may or may not be known to even your closest people, right? And maybe you don't even know this about yourself until you're put in the correct situation. All right. Well, I think we have to save the big five for the next lecture, because this is the big guy. This is the one we're going to talk about. So I will see you in the next segment to talk about the big five.